The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Dave Albo, who is chairman of the Courts of Justice Committee in the House of Delegates, and who's also from Fairfax County. Good to see you.
Thanks. Good to have me. Thanks. Good to have me. I mean, good to be here. I blew it within 15 seconds. Right.
Oh, that's all right. We all do that. I know you travel back and forth from Richmond up to your home, and I take it you use some of the hot lanes now.
Yeah, the hot lanes, especially getting back from Richmond when they're open our way, can save me about 40 minutes getting on at Fredericksburg and getting back up to the southern tip of Fairfax.
And so the one really positive thing about those hot lanes, because I've used them too, they give you an option.
Right.
And they have decreased traffic on the other portion of 95, at least I've seen that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in many cases they work fantastic. I'm a really big fan of them on the Beltway because we didn't take away anything from anybody. So when people say, I don't like the hot lanes, I said, then just ride the regular lanes that you've always been able to ride. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it gives people an option to get to Tyson's Corner from Springfield very quickly. Saves about another 40 minutes. And it's expensive, so for an average commuter, you can't really use it every single day. But all the people who are going there maybe once a week will use the hot lanes, and that makes the regular lanes less crowded. But I have a bill in this year because there's a problem I have with the hot lanes on 395. So on the Beltway, what we did was we gave people a new thing to ride on. We built new lanes, and if you want to ride in those lanes, you can pay. The new proposal is going to change the existing HOV lanes from Edsel Road in southern Fairfax to Washington, D.C. Right now, my constituents can ride on HOV after 6:30, say, to get home. So a person who wants to get back to Springfield, Virginia from D.C. can get on the HOV lanes at 6:30 as a single driver and drive for free. The plan now is to change that to a hot lane, so even if you're a single driver, you'd have to start paying, say, $6 or $7. And to me, that's not what the hot lanes are about. We're now taking something from somebody. They were able to drive free, their tax money paid for these HOV lanes they've been able to use for 30 years, and now we're going to charge them money. That's much different than the hot lanes in the Beltway where we're giving people new capacity. And so I put a bill in to say you cannot put toll lanes on 395 from Edsel to D.C.
Without any improvements, at least.
Yeah, well, there's ways you could do it. I mean, if you wanted to build a brand new lane that didn't exist before, then you can do that. But I don't think it's fair to take existing capacity and put a toll on it.
Something like that happened in Hampton Roads, and there was an uproar, wasn't there?
Yeah, I remember that. People went crazy, and they should. You can't take something that you used to get for free and start charging people for it. They'll go ballistic.
Now, how have we done in terms of implementing the additional funding that came about as a result of the 2013 transportation legislation?
Right. So to get everybody up to speed, in 2012, there was not a single penny to put a stoplight in the entire state of Virginia. That's how poor the state transportation funds were. And that's because the gas tax was set at 17.5 cents a gallon in 1987 when it cost $20,000 to pave a mile of road. In 2012, it cost $80,000, but we're still collecting 17.5 cents. So some people call it a tax increase. I don't think it was really a tax increase. I think what we really did was just index to inflation to get us back to where we should be. At any rate, it created a large amount of money, especially in Northern Virginia, almost $400 million a year, under the non-negotiable rule that 100% of the money has to stay in Northern Virginia. And it has. We've set parameters in there that if anybody spent a penny outside Northern Virginia, the whole thing blows up. The challenge has been now is to make sure that the roads we're building are ones based upon science and not politics. And the science is that we want every single project measured by how many bodies it moves. The buzzword is congestion reduction. And those streets that reduce congestion the most should get funded first. And we've got a really great delegate, Randy Minshew, who's now on the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and he raises his hand every time someone suggests a road or a project and says, you got to measure it first before you fund it.
Now, what about I-66? There's been a lot of controversy about the potential for tolling it now.
Yeah, so my constituents really don't use I-66 much because I-66 is west and we're south. But it's the same issue I was talking about the 395 hot lanes, is they want to toll 66, but they don't want to widen it. You can't add tolls to an existing road. So what the Republican caucus has been saying is that we want, if you're going to do tolls on I-66, you have to build extra lanes. We understand that roads aren't free, but if you're going to toll people, then you should be giving them something for their money.
Now, is there a way that the Department of Transportation or the Commonwealth Transportation Board actually rates potential projects on a statewide basis?
Yeah, that was, I can't remember the bill number, but remember I was telling you about the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, how we measure by congestion reduction? That concept has now gone throughout the entire state.
Okay.
So every project has to be rated. And then there's other factors, safety, bang for your buck, congestion relief, emergency evacuation routes. There's a bunch of criteria, but congestion relief is the number one.
Now, you've got a number of matters before your Courts of Justice Committee. You had last year, if I recall it correctly, you had Uber. There's all these new technologies. Now you've got drones. And I know there's a big debate about the use of drones.
This has been a very interesting topic. So the creepy behavior we're trying to outlaw is people flying a drone over your own yard and taking pictures of you and your kid. The problem is writing a bill to make just that illegal and not restrict everything else. So there are a lot of legitimate uses for drones. For example, Dominion would want to use a drone to fly over their power lines to inspect it. It's a lot less expensive than sending a guy up the tower, and that saves the ratepayers. And the same with gas line inspections. There's a lot of legitimate uses for drones. So we're looking to draft a bill that gives people the ability to restrict drones flying over their property. What's interesting about this is, well, I think it's interesting. So you think about 1607 and 1619. 1607, John Smith lands here. 1619, the First General Assembly. 1700s, Thomas Jefferson. They never, ever imagined an autonomous flying vehicle that would send pictures through the air. So when they drafted the laws in Virginia, they said you have the rights to above your yard, where you can build a house and stuff, to your grass, and then you can mine. But they didn't give you any rights above, like, your house to the sky. So we need to write a law that basically is going to change hundreds of years of common law to give people some type of property rights in what we're calling the cone of air above your own property. We're allowed by law to regulate under 400 feet. At 400 feet and above, the federal government has sole authority, satellites and airplanes and things like that. So what we're looking at drafting a bill that says that you cannot send a drone over a private residence under 400 feet to take pictures of people.
Good luck in that debate.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to make everybody happy,
Computer program as a foreign language and graduation requirements, that's another topic that you're wrestling with.
Yeah, what's really neat about my job is most of my ideas don't come from me. They come from constituents, and this is a young man who's at Lake Braddock Secondary School, and he's already maxed out on the computer programming languages. In order for him to go further, he has to give up band. And you can graduate from high school and make $80,000 to $100,000 a year if you know coding. And so his plight actually highlighted to me that our schools are kind of failing in teaching computer programming, or at least giving that opportunity for people who want to learn it. My original solution was to say computer programming can take a place of a foreign language. That doesn't seem to be so popular right now. So we're rewriting the bill to give the State Department of Education the mandate that they are going to create a method by which people can get the computer coding classes and not have to give up all their electives.
Now, I take it stalking is still a really serious problem
Yeah.
in the Commonwealth, and you've got some legislation to increase the penalties?
Yeah, so stalking is a fairly new law. I mean, I've been here 22 years. I've been chairman of the courts committee for, I think, 10. I think maybe it was about 10 years ago we passed the first stalking law. It was a hard law to write because it's a free country. You're allowed to go wherever you want to go, right? But we had to make a restriction on your constitutional right to go wherever you want to go when you are following somebody with the intent to intimidate or harass. And basic definition is you're intimidating or harassing them to the point where they are fear for their life or safety. And so we had passed our first stalking law. Well, I mean, sometimes you pass laws and these creepy people doesn't stop. So this year we're saying if you didn't learn your lesson the first time you got convicted, on your second time you're a felon. And a felony has actually a lot of implications some people don't realize. You lose your right to vote. You are probably forever going to be unable to successfully testify in any court because you will be considered a felon. You lose your gun rights. And so we're hoping that the extra penalties, so the first time a guy gets stalking, it's usually a guy, could be a woman, gets a slap on the wrist, and we can say, if you do it again, your life's ruined. So we're hoping that that'll stop it.
Now, there was another issue brought to you by a constituent, I believe, who was being defamed over the internet.
Yeah, it was last year's bill, right?
Yeah, and there's some issues around service of process or subpoenas.
Yeah, so a friend of mine owns a business, and he got defamed about his business on Yelp, I think it was. And what he wanted to do, he knew it was false. And what he wanted to do is want to sue the person for defamation, right? And defamation is communicating something that is a lie to a third party. But on the internet, you don't know, I mean, most of these people who trash people don't have the guts to put their name by it, right? So that was this case. So he needed to get the computer service provider, ISP, internet service provider, to provide him the name of the person who posted the stuff. Well, the computer internet service provider is in California, so he files for a subpoena commanding the internet service provider to give him the name. Internet service provider says you have to go to California. The Supreme Court of Virginia ruled that yes, you have to go to California,
I see.
which makes it impossible. He doesn't have enough money to, hire a lawyer out in California. So what we're trying to pass a law that says that if a Virginia court orders it, then an out-of-state provider would have to give the information.
We were talking earlier about employment in Northern Virginia and how that is really dependent upon the federal government. You used the phrase, I called it 3 degrees of separation, but talk to us about how dependent we still are.
Well, Fairfax County has 0% growth. That is not good news. And the reason we think is because of the federal government spending cuts, the sequester, and the fact the wars are ending. Now, the wars are ending is great. I mean, no one's complaining about it, but let's face the facts. I mean, it's creating an economic problem for us. So in my law practice, what I do for a living is I represent people in court. And in 2007, someone came to me and they said, I really want to hire you, how much? And I'd give them the price and they'd pay it, right? Well, now they just don't have the money. And that's because they either work for the federal government, they work for somebody who contracts the federal government, or they work for someone who sells stuff for people who work for the federal government. So 3 degrees of separation from the federal government. And that's why our economy is just dying right now. We need to reinvent the economy. We need a new internet boom. We need a new telecom boom. And I think that the people who are going to do it for us is Fairfax and Nova. So take an opportunity to kind of explain it.
Please.
Okay. So Fairfax and Nova has a very interesting project. They bought the ExxonMobil campus, which is right by their hospital. It's thousands of square feet of office space. What they're going to do is they're going to combine their clinical apparatus with all their patients and stuff, the computing power of George Mason, George Washington, UVA, and Virginia Tech, and genetic research. And they are basically they've taken everybody's human genome, and they're going to find out what works best for a person. So right now, if you had a disease, they would give you, well, everybody has a disease, you get these 3 drugs.
Right.
What they're going to find out is that people who have your genome don't need 3 drugs, they only need 2. Or, in the case of my nephew who's recovered from cancer, they were giving him 1 chemotherapy It wasn't working. He's on his way to dying, and they said, well, let's try this other one. And the other one worked. Well, eventually you'll be able to know, person with your genome, this works. It's called personalized medicine. It could be the biggest growth industry in the world, and we think that we're on the forefront of it. And so we've asked the General Assembly to fund, I think, $100 million, which is a lot of money. But Innova's putting up $1 billion.
$1 billion.
$1 billion. That's how important and how significant this thing could be. So Innova's not asking for a handout, they're just asking to partner with us, and we're really trying to push that. That could be our new internet boom, just like the 90s when Northern
Right.
Virginia was the center of the internet. And we hope that can change the economy.
So no longer one size fits all, a more targeted approach to prescription drugs for
Absolutely,
a lot of
absolutely.
diseases.
You think about how much money that can save the healthcare industry too. If you're given 4 drugs for your disease and they find out that you only need 3, they just save 25% on your bill.
Exactly. Now, I understand that Fairfax County, the schools, maybe 100, they say they are $100 million short. What's going on there?
Well, my kid's in 4th grade, and I graduated from Fairfax County Public Schools. You will not find a bigger advocate, okay? But I know the game. They come and say, we're $100 million short. That's a monstrous amount of money. They are certainly short. Let's just say they're 100% wrong, and they're only $50 million short. That's still a lot of money. But they're not thinking it through. They're down here in Richmond asking the state to send them $100 million, you know? But it's the last thing you want to do down here. The funding formulas, the way they work, is that it's all commanded by the Supreme Court of Virginia many, many years ago, said the rich counties need to help the poor counties. So the funding formula, you have Fairfax County and 9 other school jurisdictions have funding formulas where they pay a lot more than what they get. People say, why don't you change the formula? Well, there's 140 school systems, right? So I'm not going to be able to get 130 to vote for a bill that cuts the money. So we have to deal with the formula we got. But if you're trying to raise that kind of money, if the state was to put $1 billion new dollars into K through 12 education, Fairfax County pays 25% of the taxes. We would pay $250 million, and we get $90 million. So the county's not thinking this through. They want us to come. They want the Fairfax City's citizens to pay $250 million and get $90 million. They'd be much better off paying $90 million and getting $90 million themselves. I think what they're doing is they want us to do their dirty work, and they don't care how bad the deal is because they don't want to raise taxes. And what they're going to have to do is, in my opinion, they're going to have to cut, and they're going to have to find a way to keep class sizes the same, cut all the fluff out, and if they still need money and they've got to raise money, the better way to do it would be to do it where you raise $1 and you get $1.
Speaking of cuts and speaking of changes, what else is happening in your local school districts in terms of the reforms to our standards of learning?
Yeah, I had a bunch of constituents come to a Fairfax County meeting, and they had a really great presentation on critical thinking. And it took me a while to figure out what they're talking about, but there was an attorney, he really put it together. He said, I've never had an attorney or a judge ask me, here are the following multiple choice questions, which one do you want? And he's afraid that our school system is kind of gravitating toward multiple choice tests, but that's not how you survive in life, right? You survive in life by being able to think and solve problems. And what this group is basically saying is the SOLs are a good thing. They're making sure that people are learning what they're supposed to learn, but it's been at the sacrifice of learning critical thinking skills. And so that's kind of where we are right now on it. It's a theory that I think everybody agrees with. How you solve that, we don't know yet, but it's, I think, something to work on for the next couple of years.
How big a challenge is it to the school districts to have a number of students who speak different languages when they enter the school system?
Well, one of the reasons why Fairfax County claims they're $100 million short is because we have a large influx of immigrants. And the United States Supreme Court in a case called Plyler says that we have to educate every kid, even if they're undocumented or illegal, whatever term you want to use. So Fairfax County has a constitutional obligation to teach every kid that comes to the school. And some of these kids are very expensive because they don't speak English. And so I think it's something close to, it costs about $10,000 or $11,000 to educate an English-speaking kid, but it costs $14,000 a year to educate a non-English-speaking kid. And so that is one of the reasons why they are short money.
Now, what about the community colleges? How are they faring? I know that they have a number of programs which allow students to learn a trade, if you will, and get certified
Yeah.
to be a welder or nurse or whatever. How important are those programs?
I actually think that college is not for everyone. Now, I went to University of Virginia, had the best time of my life, got a good education, but I'm a lawyer, you know. But there are people who work as auto mechanics at my friend Scott Brown's Shell station at Key Mill and Rolling Road who make $80,000 and $100,000 a year. Why? Because they have a skill. My skill I needed to get by going to college and law school. Their skill they needed to get by going to a trade school. And they're making more money when they start than lawyers do. And so the community college system, I think, is the future of for a lot of kids that where they can actually learn a trade, get a skill, and have a great life.
Something akin to that you talked about earlier in terms of Inova Hospital. Cybersecurity is something that is a growing industry, and it's something that kids at junior colleges could pursue in terms of certification, and those are very high-paying jobs, as I understand it as well.
My friend Todd, he is a recruiter for cybersecurity. He says to every young person, you want to make money, get into cybersecurity. I can get you a job at 80K plus without even waiting a second. I cannot fill the positions. That would be another example. You know, might require a college degree, could require certifications in community college to learn coding.
Now, what about veterans who are returning? As you say, the wars are over, and we're happy about that. But we have to help educate them. A lot of them have experiences which can translate into credits, birth certificates, or continuation into our institutions of higher learning.
Weird you asked me that, okay, because just when I came down here running out of breath, I was at a meeting with Northern Virginia Technology Council, and they said that one of the problems the vets have is they have all these skills, but it's in military speak. And that skill, you might know how to program a certain computer program, but it's in military speak and it's not in commercial speak. And Monster.com has a translational thing that they use for veterans where the software they have says if you have this certification, this is how you'd say it in the real world. And that way these veterans can communicate to employers what kind of skills they have better. So the private sector is taking care of a lot of that.
Now, in terms of our economy, as I understand it, that the Port of Virginia is a huge economic driver. And I believe the Port of Virginia is now a profit-making entity.
Yeah, it was really controversial about how we were going to handle that. So now it's if I recall correctly, it's an authority, but it's kind of a profit-making. In other words, the government is not running it, which I usually think is better. I mean, you know, I like government, but private sector usually does things more efficiently.
And apparently we have some huge competitive advantages at that port in relation to New York, for example, or Charleston, because it's so deep and it's able to handle these larger ships that are coming out of Panama and the Suez Canal now.
Yeah, that's been an ongoing thing for years and years. People saw it coming, that these super tankers, which are very, very deep, as I understand, and only the port at Norfolk, and there might be one other on the East Coast, can handle these. And so that's why we've been investing money in improving the ports, making sure we have rail lines going in and out of the ports. And then, of course, back to House Bill 2313 in 2013, we need to get the goods. If they can't get on a rail, we have to get the goods out by transportation on trucks. And so it's all been a very, very important thing. The whole state's not Northern Virginia. I know for us who live in Springfield and Fairfax Station and Lorton, we all think, oh, you know, Northern Virginia is everything. It's a big state, and there are a lot of other important components to it. One of the biggest components of that is tidewater.
Now, another financial issue that will face localities relates to the governor's call for teacher pay increases. I know he wants to increase salaries for all state employees. That's in the second year of his budget. But that requires a commitment, a financial commitment from the locality as well, does it not?
Well, it goes back to, remember we were talking about the education funding formula? So when the state says we're going to help pay for teacher pay raise, they're only paying a small portion of it, right? So when they say you're going to get a 2% teacher pay raise, what that basically means is that Fairfax County has got to find 1.75% of the money, and the state's going to chip in 25%. So again, we're much better off in Fairfax funding our own schools or if you have a teacher pay raise, you don't want to run it through the funding formula. You want to run it through another formula so the money comes directly back to Fairfax.
Now, what about charter schools? I understand we only have 9 in the Commonwealth, and there's been a push to increase that, but there's been some impediments.
Oh man, I'm in the middle of that because I'm not for it. Now, people say, you don't like charter schools? I love charter schools. We have a charter school called Thomas Jefferson High School, which is a technology school. It's arguably the best charter school in the entire nation. But the problem with this bill is it says that the state can order that a charter school be built in a locality. Well, I want to know who's going to pay for it. If the state orders to build a new school, you know, they need to pay for it. They wouldn't put that in the bill. Last year when the bill came up, I said, I need that in writing because I'm not falling for this, right? And they wouldn't put it in the bill, and now they need my vote. And I said, well, I told you last year, if you want to build a charter school, that's great, I love them. But if you're going to order it, you pay for it. You're not making my constituents pay for a school they didn't ask for.
So right now, local school districts determine whether a charter school can come into existence, and the plan is to move that to the State Board of Education?
That's correct. The reason is because only 9 charters have been approved because the local boards of education, they don't want to be told what to do. They think their system's the best. That's why I think charter schools are great. Provide some competition, some alternate ways to help kids learn who don't learn in a normal public school setting. So the idea is really good. But the reason that the only 9 have been done is because the local school districts aren't approving them. So the bill says that the state can approve.
I see.
And again, that'd be great. But if you're going to approve it, I want you to pay for it.
Now, how's the Virginia retirement system doing? I know a number of years ago there was money borrowed from there and we're playing catch up. So what's going on there?
Well, listen, I'm a big Bob McDonnell fan for what he did for our state. 2313 House Transportation Bill we talked about, basically through his leadership. And a lot of people don't understand what Bob also did was save Virginia retirement system from bankruptcy. We were going the same way everybody else was. So this pension system was set up when people lived to 72. Now they live in 85 or 90, and so these pensions are becoming unaffordable. We didn't want to take something away from somebody who already dedicated themselves to public service based upon a pension. So the normal employee would say, or like a teacher, I agree to do public service. I agree that my pay won't be as good as my peers, but in exchange I'm going to get a pension when I finish my 30 years. So we didn't want to take anything away from anybody. So what we did was we killed the pension, the 100% pension, for all future employees. And we put people on a combination pension and 401k. And that's kind of bent the cost curve. We think it's going to, that we'll be pretty well off here and fully funded in 10, 15 years.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us, Delegate Dave Albo.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.